My wife called me dead weight at her office party. Then the board introduced me as the new owner. Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The champagne was good. Marcus Thompson stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Meridian Group's 31st floor event space, holding a glass of Perrier Jouet he hadn't asked for and wasn't drinking, and looked at the room with the quiet, observational attention he brought to everything that mattered. The annual leadership gala had the specific, heightened atmosphere of a corporate event that had been given a generous budget. The catering was real rather than serviceable, the decorations communicated occasion rather than obligation, and the 200 people moving through the space carried themselves with the particular energy of employees who understood that how they presented themselves tonight was visible to people whose opinions of them had professional consequences. He'd arrived with Elena, which was how he arrived at these events. As her husband, the accessory, the man who stood at the edges of conversations he wasn't part of while Elena worked the room with the practiced, gleaming efficiency of someone for whom every social situation was an optimization problem. He'd been to 4 of these events in the 3 years she'd been at the Meridian Group, and he'd stood near windows at all of them, and he'd learned, over 4 events, exactly what the room's topology was, who the power nodes were, and how Elena moved between them. He was watching her now, across the room, in the cluster of people that surrounded Diane Hargrove, the Meridian Group's outgoing CEO, when he heard his name. Not heard, that wasn't quite right. The room was loud enough that individual conversations blurred into ambient noise at any significant distance. What Marcus registered was the specific quality of a cluster's response to something. The way a group of people react when they've heard something that strikes them as delicious. The particular laughter of people receiving what they consider an insider's candor, the kind of laugh that requires the people laughing to feel certain that the subject of the remark is not within earshot. He was within earshot. He moved slightly closer, which meant he was slightly less near the window, and he listened with the focused, undemonstrative attention of a man who has learned that the most revealing information arrives when people believe they are unobserved. Honestly, the definition of dead weight, Elena was saying, in the warm, confiding register she used when she wanted people to feel like they were receiving something genuine. I've been carrying this marriage for years. He means well, Marcus always means well, but he's just not in the same league. The company was never going to be part of his world, you know. He doesn't understand what we do here. She paused for the laugh she'd calculated would come, and it came. I keep telling my friends, some people are meant to watch from the sidelines, and some people are meant to be on the field. Marcus is a very good spectator. More laughter. Marcus stood 12 feet away and heard every word with the perfect clarity of a man standing in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. He felt, underneath the composure he maintained with the automatic, practiced ease of long habit, something that was not quite anger and not quite grief but the specific, clarifying sensation of a decision that has been forming for months finally completing itself. He'd been building toward this for a long time. He'd been patient in the way of someone who understood that patience was not the absence of action but the correct timing of it. The timing, Marcus Thompson understood with the certainty of a man who checks his watch and knows the meeting is about to start, was now. He took a sip of his champagne, set the glass on a passing server's tray, and found a quiet corner of the room to make a call. He should explain the shares. The Meridian Group had been, 7 years ago, a mid-sized management consulting firm with a solid reputation and a complicated ownership structure that its founders had never quite rationalized, a consequence of 3 rounds of venture funding, 2 partial buyouts, and the kind of accumulated equity arrangements that accumulate when a company grows faster than its legal documentation can keep up with. Marcus had noticed this 7 years ago, when he'd been brought in as a financial consultant on a matter that touched the Meridian Group's holdings, and he'd noticed it with the specific attention of a man who understood that complicated ownership structures, properly navigated, could be simplified in directions that favored the most patient and attentive participant. He'd bought his first tranche of shares 18 months before he met Elena. He'd bought the second 6 months after they married, when Elena's rapid rise through the Meridian Group's ranks had given him both the proximity to understand the company's trajectory and the personal motivation to understand it more deeply than a casual observer might. He'd bought the third, and the fourth, through holding companies that Vivian Hayes had structured with her characteristic, elegant invisibility, over the following 2 years. By the time the Meridian Group's board had begun discussions about the transition from Diane Hargrove's leadership, a process that had been underway for 14 months, that Marcus knew about in detail, that he had been part of in ways that no one at the company's gala tonight except the 3 board members he trusted most would be able to predict. Marcus Thompson held, through Axiom Capital and 2 related vehicles, 44% of the Meridian Group's voting shares. The next largest single block was held by the board's investment committee. Marcus had a standing arrangement with 2 of that committee's 4 members, formalized through agreements that Vivian had drafted and that had been in place for 8 months. The mathematics were simple. What was not simple was the timing. The board announcement, the transition plan, the leadership structure, the new ownership framework, had been scheduled for the January board meeting. Marcus had been the one to suggest, through Robert Chen, his closest contact on the board, that the announcement might benefit from a different venue, a different audience, a different kind of visibility. The annual gala, Robert had said. You want to announce at the gala. Elena will be there, Marcus had said. She's been there every year. The whole company will be there. Robert had been quiet for a moment. Marcus, is this about the company or about your wife? It's about both, Marcus had said. Which is honest. Robert had agreed. That had been 3 weeks ago. Tonight was the gala. The call he made from the quiet corner of the room was to Vivian Hayes, who was not at the gala but who had been, Marcus suspected, awake for the past hour waiting for this particular call. It's time, Marcus said. Roberts confirmed the sequence. Vivian said. He'll introduce the ownership announcement at 9:15, during the formal remarks segment. You'll be presented as the majority shareholder and incoming executive chair. A pause. How are you feeling? Clear, Marcus said. The same word he always used when people asked him this question at significant moments, because it was always the truest word. The divorce filing, Vivian said. I have it ready. Do you want it filed tonight or after the announcement? Marcus thought about this. After, he said. Tonight is about the company. The divorce is its own separate thing. Agreed, Vivian said. I'll be in my office until midnight. Call me. He pocketed his phone. He found a fresh glass of champagne on a passing tray and took it this time with genuine intention, because there were moments that deserved to be held with something in your hand, and this was one. He looked across the room at Elena, who was still in her cluster, still performing the warm, confiding illumination of a woman in her element, still unaware of the specific geometry of the evening she was in. He thought about dead weight. He thought about Very Good Spectator. He thought about the 4 galas and the 4 windows and the 4 years of standing at the edges of conversations in a company he was quietly, methodically acquiring. He thought about his grandmother, who had told him when he was 9 years old, in the specific language of a woman who had navigated a world that underestimated her with extraordinary strategic patience, baby, let them talk. The people who do the most talking are usually the people doing the least watching. You watch, you wait, and when the moment comes, it comes to you. The moment was coming. At 9:05, Robert Chen took the microphone at the front of the room and the particular sound of a corporate event transitioning from social to formal moved through the crowd, conversations tapering, attention redirecting, 200 people turning toward the front with the practiced responsiveness of people who understood this was the part of the evening that mattered professionally. Good evening, everyone, Robert said, with the warm authority of a man who was comfortable in this register. On behalf of the Meridian Group's board, I want to thank you for being here tonight. This is not just an annual celebration. This year, it's also an announcement that I think will shape the direction of this company in ways we're genuinely excited about. Marcus moved from the edge of the room toward the front, slowly, unremarkably, the movement of someone repositioning for a better view of the remarks. As many of you know, Diane Hargrove has led this company with extraordinary vision for 11 years, and the transition plan the board has developed honors that legacy while positioning the Meridian Group for its next chapter. Robert paused, with the practiced timing of someone who understood that the space before significant information was as important as the information itself. As part of that transition, I'm pleased to share that the board has formalized a new ownership structure. The Meridian Group's majority shareholder and incoming executive chair has been deeply invested in this company's trajectory for several years, and we believe his leadership will be transformative. Marcus was near the front now. He could see Elena from where he stood, could see her in her cluster, attentive, curious, the expression of a senior employee listening for information about her company's future. It is my genuine pleasure to introduce the Meridian Group's new majority owner and executive chair, Marcus Thompson. The room processed this. The processing took approximately 3 seconds, which was the amount of time it took 200 people to hear a name, locate its owner in the room, understand the connection between the name and the woman they all knew, and begin to understand what the combination of those elements meant. Marcus walked to the front of the room. He shook Robert's hand. He turned to face the crowd. He held the moment, not theatrically, not with the performed patience of someone enjoying the drama, but with the genuine, unhurried composure of a man who has arrived at a place he prepared for and is simply present in it. He found Elena in the crowd. She was looking at him. The expression on her face was one he had never seen there before and would spend some time afterward trying to find language for. Not shock exactly, though shock was the immediate layer. Not humiliation, though that was arriving behind the shock. Something deeper than both of those, the specific, vertiginous experience of a person who has understood, all at once, that the world they believed they were in was not the world they were actually in, and that the distance between those two worlds is very large. "Thank you, Robert," Marcus said, into the microphone, in the same even voice he always had. "And thank you to all of you. I want to start by saying how much I respect what this team has built under Diane's leadership. What you've accomplished here is genuinely extraordinary, and I want you to know that the transition the board has designed is about building on that, not changing it." He looked out at the room. At 200 people who were listening with the complete, focused attention of people whose professional futures were connected to the voice at the microphone. "I also want to say something personal," Marcus said. "Because personal honesty is something I believe in, and because some of you heard something tonight that I think deserves a response." The room, which had been attentive, became something more than attentive. The specific quality of 200 people understanding that what was about to be said was not in the prepared remarks. "Someone at this event tonight described me as dead weight," Marcus said. "As someone who doesn't understand what this company does. As a spectator." He let the sentence land without adding to it immediately, giving it the room it needed. "I want to address that directly, because the people in this room deserve transparency from the person who is now their company's majority owner." He looked at Elena. She hadn't moved. She was standing in the same place, in the same cluster, but the cluster had shifted subtly around her, the specific, unconscious movement of people putting slight distance between themselves and someone who has become the subject of a situation. "I have been investing in the Meridian Group for 7 years, Marcus said. "I have studied its operations, its market position, its leadership, and its people with the kind of attention that doesn't announce itself, because the most useful attention rarely does." He paused. "Dead weight doesn't acquire 44% of a company. Dead weight doesn't sit on a transition committee. Dead weight isn't introduced by the board chair as the person whose leadership will shape the next chapter." He said the next sentence without hardness, without satisfaction, with the plain, factual quality of someone correcting a misapprehension. "I was never a spectator. I owned the field." The room was completely quiet. Elena's face had completed its journey. The composure she'd maintained through the shock and the arriving humiliation had given way, fully, to the unmanaged expression of a woman standing in the consequences of her own words in a room where those consequences were visible to everyone she worked with. "I want to be clear about something else," Marcus said, and his voice gentled slightly, moving from the declarative to something more personal. "The people in this room, the analysts and the consultants and the support staff and the leadership team, this announcement changes nothing about your standing here. The Meridian Group's commitment to its employees is the foundation of what I'm building on, not something I'm reorganizing away from. You will be treated with the dignity that good work deserves." He looked at Robert. "I think that's what I needed to say. Let's continue the celebration." He handed the microphone back. The room began its recovery, the specific, social process of 200 people recalibrating what they'd witnessed into something they could hold and discuss and carry home. It was not quiet and it was not calm, and it had a quality of energy that Marcus had anticipated and that he moved through with the same unhurried steadiness with which he'd moved through the whole evening. Robert was at his elbow. "That was not entirely in the prepared remarks," Robert said, mildly. "No," Marcus agreed. "But it was true." "Yes," Robert said. "It was." Elena found him by the windows. Which was, Marcus thought, a kind of circularity. He'd spent 4 galas near the windows at the edges of things, and now she'd come to find him there, and the windows were the same windows but everything else was different. She came through the crowd with the careful, deliberate movement of a woman who understood that how she crossed this room was being observed and who had not yet figured out how to perform the crossing because nothing in her repertoire had prepared her for what the crossing required. "Marcus," she said, when she reached him. He turned to look at her. He let himself look at her fully, which he'd been doing less and less of in recent months. Not from aversion but from the particular economy of a man who understands that some things don't require his full attention anymore. He looked at her now, completely, the way you look at something you're saying goodbye to. I don't know what to say, she said. I know, he said. What I said tonight, earlier, I didn't know you were. I know you didn't know, Marcus said. But Elena, you've been saying versions of that for 3 years. Dead weight was tonight's version. Before that it was you said I didn't have ambition. Before that it was that I didn't understand her world. All of it was a version of the same thing. I was less than you, I was holding you back, I was a spectator in a game you were playing. He looked at her with the honest, unperforming regard of a man who has finished something and knows it. The only thing that changed tonight is that 200 people heard what you usually say in private. Marcus, please, I'm filing for divorce, he said. Vivian Hayes will be in contact with your attorney. You'll be treated fairly. I want you to know that. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because this marriage stopped being a partnership a long time ago, and I've been patient about it for too long, and tonight was the last version of the same conversation I'm willing to have. Elena's eyes had filled, and he believed the tears were real, believed that somewhere underneath the performance of the woman who had told a cluster of colleagues that her husband was dead weight, there was a person who was genuinely grieving what she'd done and what it had cost. He didn't doubt the grief. He just understood that grief, by itself, was not enough to rebuild something that had been dismantled over 3 years of accumulated small contempts. What about my position here? She asked, and the question arrived with the specific quality of someone who has decided that the most immediate thing needs to be addressed even if it isn't the most important thing. Your work record at the Meridian Group is strong, Marcus said. Your professional contributions are genuine. Those things are yours and I wouldn't take them from you. He paused. But the culture I'm building here is one where people treat each other with dignity, including people they're personally connected to. How you move forward professionally will be up to you and the performance standards the company applies to everyone. He held her gaze. I'll be a fair employer. I've always been a fair person. She had nothing to say to that, because it was true, and because the trueness of it was its own kind of indictment. He left her by the windows. The Thompson Workplace Dignity Foundation incorporated 4 months after the gala, with a mission that Vivian had helped Marcus articulate through 3 drafts, for the employees who carried more than they were credited for, and the people who built things in silence while others claimed the stage. We see your work. We honor it here. Its programming was specific and practical. Financial literacy and equity education for employees in complex corporate structures, mentorship for men who had been systematically undervalued in professional and personal relationships, and a grant program that funded employees with entrepreneurial ambitions who lacked the access to capital that their talent deserved. Marcus spoke at the first event himself. He told the true story. Not all of it, because not all of it was public, but the essential shape of it. He told it the way he told everything, without embellishment, without the performance of a man who wants credit for his composure, just the plain account of what had happened and what he'd done with it. He told 40 people in a conference room. The most powerful position you can occupy in any room is knowing more than people expect you to know. Not to use it as a weapon. Not to accumulate it for leverage. But because knowledge, honestly acquired and carefully maintained, is the foundation of every good decision, and good decisions are what everything else is built on. He told them, someone called me dead weight. I want you to know what dead weight looks like. It looks like 7 years of patient acquisition. It looks like a board announcement in a room full of people who believed they already knew who I was. It looks like having done the work so thoroughly that the reveal was inevitable, not because I wanted a reveal, but because the work was always going to speak eventually. He told them, let the work speak. Build something real in the time you're given. And find the people who ask about what you're building, because the people who never ask are telling you something essential about their relationship to your story. The Meridian Group, in the first year under Marcus's executive chairmanship, reduced its employee attrition by 31%, increased its junior analyst promotion rate by 40%, and expanded into 2 new practice areas that the previous leadership had considered but not prioritized. None of these outcomes were announced at a gala. They were reported in the quarterly board materials, in the specific, unembellished language of numbers that spoke for themselves. Marcus reviewed those numbers every quarter at the head of the board table, in the same building where he'd stood near windows for 4 years, in the same city where he'd built something in silence while someone told a cluster of people he didn't understand what she did. He understood what she did. He owned the building she did it in. On a Tuesday morning in November, Marcus Thompson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Meridian Group's 31st floor, his windows, in his building, looking at his city doing its Tuesday business in the autumn light, and drank his coffee with the specific, uncomplicated satisfaction of a man who is exactly where he built himself to be. His phone showed a message from Vivian. Divorce decree finalized. Everything clean. You're free, Marcus. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked at Atlanta. He had never been dead weight. He had never been a spectator. He had been, the whole time, the quietest person in every room, and the most consequential one. He finished his coffee. He went to work. And the work, as it always had, spoke entirely for itself. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If it moved you, like, share, and comment on the lessons you took from it. Let me know where you're watching from, and I'll see you in the next video.